Hey everyone, Jamie here. Welcome to Flame Bearers Unedited, a brand new series bringing to you largely unedited conversations. We heard you loud and clear. You want to hear more stories of more elite women athletes from around the world. So we're going to deliver. In Unedited, we're going to bring you completely unfiltered conversations. We hit start, we have our conversation, we hit end. What we're going to see, though, is slightly different because we're not going to have all the traditional bells and whistles that you're used to in Flame Bearers production. So let's jump in.
Yeah, so my name is Jodie Williams. I'm a track and field athlete. Used to be more predominantly 1-2 based, and now more, we'll say 4-2 based. I won't let go of that 200. To me, I guess off track, I'm heavily involved in the coffee community. I love supporting anything to do with women and girls. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here.
Take us back to your childhood. How did you get into track?
I was a very sporty kid, grew up doing sports. We were a pretty active family. My dad was very keen to have a professional athlete in the family, so I think he saw my love for sports early on and he kind of went for it. I used to do gymnastics, I used to play field hockey, netball, I used to swim, but everything I did, I was just really fast. Like I wasn't really very good at the other sports, I was just very explosive and I was very fast. So like all of our sports days, I would always win and they would make me race the older kids. One of my schools made me race the boys and then they made it into a heptathlon that I had to compete against the boys because no one could beat me. And I ended up winning everything. So yeah, yes. It was a very crucial moment in my life when I won that boys heptathlon. There was a lot of rivalry going on. So yeah.
Take us to that moment. When was that? Did the guys hate that? The guys must have hated that.
Yeah, I specifically there was this one other boy. I think all of the other boys had accepted it. I was about probably 13. So I think all of the other boys had accepted it, but there was this one other boy. He was very athletic, very good at all other sports, and he was fast. And we always had this thing where we would race, and we had like this kind of ongoing back and forth. So when they said, "Oh, it's going to be Jody's going to compete against the boys in the sports day, and it's not just going to be sprints. We're going to do 7 events to make it fair." So this was like our moment that we've been waiting for. We had been talking about it. And I was like, I'm going to beat you. And it turned into this massive thing. And I ended up winning very marginally, like by a couple of points. And it was just like the whole school got involved. It was a momentous victory for me, for sure.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. I can 100% imagine 13-year-old Jody just totally kicking butt.
Yeah. She
incredible.
was so happy with herself in that moment.
So connect the dots for us. How did you get from there to where you are today?
It was really I was going to say it was a smooth journey. It was everything but smooth, but like the transition into actually competing was super smooth for me. So my PE teacher was like, you need to take this seriously. This isn't just normal speed. I think you're really talented. And like I said, my dad was very keen for one of us at least to play professional sports. So he took me down to our local athletics club. I was very lucky that I had one within walking distance, a track within walking distance. Shout out Hearts Phoenix Athletics Club. I'm still a member to this day. And yeah, I joined the local sprints group. I think I was 11 at this point. I think that's the earliest you can start competing. Winning local meets and then winning meets at a national level. And then I found myself competing for Great Britain for the World Youth Championships. I think that's the first moment that I was like, wow, okay, we're actually doing this.
That is incredible. I love it. And obviously you've been to a couple games yourself. What are some moments that stand out to you?
Honestly, Tokyo for me was an incredible experience. Rio was my first games and I didn't have the best experience. I think everyone says their first Olympics is like super overwhelming. And I definitely found that. I had missed London. I had made a bid to run in London and I was devastated. I tore my hamstring at the trials. So like Rio was really a big, long build up. And I think when I got there, I just wasn't really mentally prepared to actually be there. But it was incredible. I was there with so many of my training partners and teammates, and my coach was out there. So
walk us through kind of if you're open to it, the things you say to yourself, kind of your inner dialogue. Because so many of us deal with these fears on a daily basis, where we're saying to ourselves, we don't know if we're going to reach our goal or not. So how do you had a lot of, I call that bravery. I think you're incredibly brave to continue to work towards your goal. So how do you continue day in and day out to do that?
I'm stubborn. Like, when I decide I'm going to do something, I won't let go of it. Sometimes to my own detriment, honestly. Sometimes there is a time where you have to say, this isn't it. But
sure.
Yeah, I'm very, very stubborn. And like I said, I don't wake up every day full of motivation. I don't wake up every day thinking, can't wait to experience this lactic. Like, that's not what happens. I go through everyday emotions on top of those things too. In my own personal life, there's fluctuations within that too. Just as everyone deals with. And I think for me, it is really just like, it's those small steps on those days that I didn't want to do it and I do. I give myself a pat on the back. That's the achievement of the day. And I guess that's what it is. Like, every day, your achievement or your big tick or your pat on the back is going to be a different thing. Like, some days I'm going to have an excellent session. I really wanted to be there. I overachieved. I way surpassed all of my time targets. And I'm like, great job, Jody. Some days I turn up to the track and I'm like, great job, Jody. Those are, I think, I've learned to celebrate where you're at. A lot of the time I used to I'm still very hard on myself, but I used to really let that voice like run away and be very harsh. And I just kind of learned to make friends with myself. Like, I still have those negative thoughts that creep in. And when they do, I just acknowledge them. I'm like, that's not a positive thought, and that's not really how you feel about yourself. And I'm just like, inside my head is a really kind place these days, if I'm honest. I give myself a lot of grace and space. And when those thoughts do come in, because they still do, I still have really negative days, I'm kind about it, instead of being like, I think the negative voice used to creep in, and then I would berate myself in the negative voice as well. And now it creeps in and I'm just like, these things aren't true. They're not. These are just, it's just that one voice. Sometimes it even helps to name that one voice, because it's always the same, the same one in your head. And I just kind of learned to make friends with her, like sat her down and was like, Jody, that's not how you feel about yourself. And I just, I just practiced a lot of self-kindness, I think, in those moments.
I absolutely love that. So much of what you share, I completely resonate with. 100%. I actually name my voices too.
Amazing. I'm glad that didn't sound crazy.
No, 100%. I think that's actually a proven cognitive behavioral therapy approach to kind of naming something and distancing yourself. I think that's brilliant. So you mentioned you're in a different headspace. I know you have a ton going on with coffee and Listen. Tell us about that whole part of you, because I know it's a big part of who you are.
Yeah, for sure. It's a balance I'm still trying to get right. I think I'm always a big advocate for athletes being more than just an athlete, and for having other things going for them. And I think sometimes I've actually taken that too far on the other end of things, and maybe taken on too much, and my stuff on track has suffered. So I'm kind of careful in that messaging these days, and more than just an athlete. But at the end of the day, if we're taking this really seriously, it's something that only a tiny percentage of people can do. So it takes, an insane amount of both mental and physical commitment. So I think finding that balance has been really interesting for me, and I think I've got it right this year. My boundaries are real strong. I've loved taking on all these other things and experiencing and almost allowing myself to really explore those other areas of me. I think a lot of the time within professional sports, we don't allow ourselves to indulge in those other facets of ourselves. I think everyone has, multiple pockets of who they are. And I think as athletes, sometimes we really shy away from that and feel like we have to just be this one thing. And if we're not serious. So for me, it's just been a journey of really allowing myself to be those other things that I am. And it's taken me on a really interesting path. I didn't know where it was going to go, really. But it's been amazing. Yeah, I found myself in the most incredible spaces, very similarly to where sports has taken me. These things have taken me to amazing places. I recently came back from a trip to East Africa, and it was just the best. I was in Uganda visiting FemLead. I went to Rwanda, really just because I've heard incredible things about Kigali, and everything they say about Kigali is true. I couldn't recommend it more. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. And I was in Zanzibar for my 30th birthday as well with some of my closest women in my life. So yeah, these things have taken me to some incredible places, and it's been a really interesting experience for me.
For people who are not familiar with Listen Journal, tell us about what it is and why you started it.
Yeah, it's still a work in progress. It's something that I'm very much doing on the side, and I've had to kind of take it one notch down again.
Okay.
Just because of
about what it is and why you started it
this year. But I really wanted to create a space for women to be able to tell stories on their own terms.
Okay.
I think growing up, a lot of the time, like I felt my story was always told for me. A lot of the time it was told for me by, male journalists that maybe didn't always have the same or even a close lived experience to me. So didn't always tell my story with the most empathy, we'll say. I know exactly what it feels like to have my words, twisted, sensationalized, made into headlines, taken out of context. And also I've read articles about myself where I'm just like, that's just not what I said or not what I felt like I wanted to portray. So I think from those experiences, I've always really been very passionate about, number one, making sure people feel heard and seen as they are, especially younger girls, but definitely women. I feel like the older we get, the less we feel permission to tell our real story. And I think the older we get, the more we become molded by society and by, things that are expected of us. And I just wanted to create a space where we could just remove that completely, where you can tell your true story on your own terms in whatever capacity that is. I wanted to be very open. Some people are visual storytellers. Some people are great with their words. Maybe it's video. Maybe you write poetry. Maybe you're an illustrator. I don't know. Anything that you feel most comfortable in. That's how I want you to be able to express yourself and tell your story how you see it. So that's kind of the space I'm trying to create. It's going to be part journal, mainly submission based. I will run themes for submissions, as well as have an open submission where people can submit whatever they feel called to. And then eventually I would love to grow it into a space where we hold events, we hold workshops, something tangible where people can come together and either, gain a new skill or even just gain community amongst others that are like themselves. There'll definitely be a coffee focus around that. And there's lots of places that I would like it to grow into, but we're definitely starting at the journal and just trying to create a space for women really on their own terms. And I want it to mold along with the community. So I'm leaving it pretty open to see where that will go.
Oh, I love that so much. If there's ways that we can support you on that, we're all in. That is very similar. It's a similar ethos to what we try to do in terms of coming in with not a narrative that we want to push, but really trying to create the space and the opportunity for the athletes to tell the stories that they want told. So I absolutely love what you're doing. You mentioned coffee a couple times. I'm just having my first cup of the day. Tell us about your love and where that came from.
It's funny. I used to actually hate coffee. So I grew up, my dad is a coffee fanatic. So I grew up in a household where like coffee was, I could always smell it. He would always have like these fancy gadgets that I just didn't understand. And he would go to a coffee shop every morning. And that was kind of like our like first bonding experience, I guess. Like I would always want to go with him on the weekends when I could. And we would go to coffee shops. But I was a kid, so I didn't really, coffee wasn't my thing. I'd get a hot chocolate or whatever I got. But I think the experience of being in a coffee shop was always something very close to me. It reminded me of, you know, bonding with my dad, and it was just a safe space for me. And I think as I got older, coffee shops remained a very safe space for me. But I think also as I got older, I started to notice that they became kind of exclusionary. Like I started noticing that the more specialized I got into coffee, the more this space became kind of like an exclusive space, something that wasn't always so welcoming. And I think that's really what started getting like my ideas going. And for me, whatever I do, I always jump into it and I become obsessed. So I started noticing this and I was just like, let me delve a little deeper into this. And yeah, it kind of grew from there. I actually started liking coffee. I started drinking coffee. One of my best friends introduced me to I think it was an iced caramel latte or something.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then it kind of grew from there. And now I'm a strictly black coffee only drinker.
Okay.
But yeah, I think I kind of got into it as like a coffee as community type thing. You know, I travel a lot, obviously, through sports. So wherever I went, I would always find the local coffee shop. I would always a lot of the time I feel like I need to escape that competitive environment. So I go on a walk the day before I compete always. We compete in the evening. So I go on a walk in the morning too. So that became I would go to whatever coffee shops I could find. Then I started making these lists every time I went to a city. So I have all these city lists. And then, like I said, I kind of started noticing like the same groups of people being in coffee shops, the same kind of feel. And I was like, I want to do something about that. You know, I would speak to a lot of my friends and they would just be like, oh, it doesn't really feel like a space for me. Or I walk in and I don't always necessarily like understand what's going on. So I don't feel like that's necessarily like a place that I would want to go. So I think for me, I really wanted to take that community angle, kind of dig a little deeper on that like subject and see where I could take it. And that's really taken off for me. I think I now see coffee as community. I want to break down a lot of those barriers within coffee. I started, digging into the history of coffee and how it's so interconnected with slavery and, the trading of spices, tea, tobacco, sugar. Coffee was another trading item as well. So I kind of started, digging more and more into that and finding more about the history of coffee and started getting involved on the farming side of things. I found out that like 80% and over of coffee farmers are actually, it's women doing the coffee farming. They're very often, make very, very little money on that side of things. So, all my worlds came kind of like started to become very connected. So it's been a really interesting journey. It's still going. I'm still figuring out where I fit into that coffee space. But there's some exciting things happening behind the scenes. So I'm excited to eventually show everyone where that's going. But it's been a very interesting journey.
Oh, that is so cool. I love that you have taken also a historical perspective, trying to
behind the scenes, so
better understand and also spread awareness for like
eventually
where this actually comes from and the lives it has
shaped. It's been a very
shaped.
interesting journey.
I think that's incredible. I can't wait to follow along. You mentioned briefly that when you were younger, you felt like you were misrepresented. Tell us a little bit about that. Take us back to those moments. What was said about you, if you feel comfortable, and how did that make you feel? Because a lot of what we try to do is we try to make sure that words are not twisted, that it's your story put in your own words. So just as a point of comparison, what were some of the things that journalists got wrong?
I think it was partly me and partly journalism. I think when I was growing up, this is back in my day, when I was growing up, like social media wasn't huge. Like I think Instagram became a thing when I was just leaving school. And then it kind of blew up from there. So I think a lot of my younger years, there was not really social media, nowhere near to the extent that there is today. So like traditional journalism was really much more predominant. It was very much more like newspaper interviews, like really sat down. There were no like podcasts or anything like that. Like it was really just sit down with a journalist that's kind of like your traditional journalist, I guess, and do a traditional style interview. So I feel like there was a lot more opportunity to twist words and be misrepresented, because it's not like this, there's no, there was a lot less transparency. And I think also, the British media has not a great history. And like, this was back where it was, like, I won't even mention the publications, but like sensationalizing headlines was definitely a huge thing back then for the British media. Like that's what they were going for. So it was much more, people were trying to trip you up. You always felt like you had to be on guard. And I was just a young girl, I was 15 years old at this point. I was trying to figure out who I was. I really had no idea. And I felt like I had to fit into this certain mold. So I would always be very like careful about what I said. And I wouldn't really want to say anything that was anyway controversial or like really say what was on my mind. So I think a lot of the times if I ever did, speak out a little bit, it would be taken immediately. And I still remember like there would be headlines about me called, they used to call me money legs, which was just used to drive me crazy because number one, like,
money legs?
Yes. I don't know where they got it from. I think one time I had told a story about my friends used to call my legs the money makers. Like a lot of the times I couldn't play sports at schools or like I was like very, there's certain things that I couldn't do. So my friends had a running joke about my legs being like, oh no, like you got to be careful. You can't touch the money makers.
Okay.
So I told that story one time and then I got slapped with this label of money legs and it would run everywhere. Like it was just all over the place. And it was so like just the opposite of everything that I felt like I was. It was just always weird stuff like that. And I never felt like I could really speak on what I wanted to speak on or even just represent myself in a way that I wanted to, because every time I did tell any kind of like personal story, it would get twisted and turned into something that it just really wasn't. So it taught me to be like really careful about the way I spoke and really guarded. I would always be like suspicious in interviews, and that's just not the way I ever wanted to carry myself. So now I'm like the complete opposite. Like I'll tell anyone anything, honestly. At this point, like I'm super open with everything. I think I've come to terms with a lot of things in my life, and now I'm just like, yeah, this was my experience, and I had these things, and I think I'm just a lot more trusting with everyone and just what I feel comfortable in saying. But definitely back then I was very like careful of what I spoke on.
Sure. I can't even imagine. That's such a burden to carry, to feel like you're always on guard and that people are looking for ways to kind of co-opt or steal your story. That's really frustrating. One thing we like to end with is an action that you can ask our community members to take. So it could be, read this book, call this person. One thing you want people to take after hearing your story. So what would be the one action you want people to take after they hear your story?
At least once in your day, just stop and congratulate yourself for whatever that may be. Just one time in your day, just stop whatever you're doing and take maybe just 1 minute even 30 seconds to just sit back and say good job for something that you've done that day. It could be anything as small as, well done for getting out of bed today. Good job for, getting dressed today. Sometimes that's a huge achievement in your day. And I think, I would love for people to just take one moment to just say, give yourself a little pat on the back and just say, you know what, good job. Because I think a lot of the time we don't see what people are going through. We don't, have time to hear about people's struggles, and someone might be having the hardest day of their life and they have to turn up to work and chat to everyone in the office. And I think sometimes it's good to just take a moment out and be like, do you know what? Well done for even getting here today. So I think that would be my action. Chat to everyone in the office. And I think sometimes it's good to just take a moment out and be like, do you know what? Well done for even getting here today. So I think that would be my action.
Thanks for tuning in to Flame Bearers Unedited. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a positive review on your favorite podcasting platform or YouTube. If you want to see more behind the scenes coverage, follow us on social media. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, whatever platform you're on, we're there too. Thanks, and we'll catch you on our next episode.